Do you struggle with toxic productivity? As a former productivity geek and addict, I know exactly what it's like to be obsessed about productivity and want to learn as many tools as possible, read books on productivity, watch Adi Abdal channel, and be totally obsessed with the idea of spending your time well. In this episode, I'm going to explore why it is that we become so addicted to this concept of productivity and how it actually impacts our life and makes us in some ways less productive and at least less fulfilled. The first main concept here is the idea that productivity really is the notion of spending your time well. When you're aiming to be productive, you're looking at the day ahead and you're thinking, how do I spend this time the most effectively as possible? There's several flaws to this concept. The very first flaw is the fact that time well spent is a very subjective matter. If you're a YouTuber, it could be filming a bunch of YouTubers. If you're an author, it could be writing books. But when you're an entrepreneur, there's a bunch of different things you could do that define time as well spent. I recorded a previous episode called The Productivity Illusion, where I explained that a lot of these productivity tools out there tell you how to time block and use Pomodoro and all these different things, but they don't tell you what to spend your time on. And that's actually the hardest thing to define, because time well spent is doing what? Because is it time well spent spending time with your friends? Sure. If you do that the entire week, you're not really going to make progress on your business. Is it time well spent to carve out social media posts the entire week to grow your business? Maybe. But maybe it could also be worth going to networking events or starting a podcast or writing your next novel. So you see, already we have an issue here with time well spent, which is the very first idea really behind productivity, is to spend time well and effectively. Because this is easy when you're in a factory, because then you just measure the exact output and the tasks are very mechanical. But in life, things are a lot more fluctuating. One day it can feel like time well spent to invest in spending more time in a certain hobby. Another time you feel relationships are more important, and things are constantly fluctuating. So I know what it's like. When I was obsessed around productivity, I really tried to decide what was worth my time the most. And so it was very easy to eliminate certain things that were, in my mind, a total waste of time, things around television or scrolling the phone or what have you. But then spending time well, okay, well, sometimes this meant going on a hike. Sometimes it meant seeing friends. A lot of the time it meant focusing on the business and growing the business. But then what does that mean within it? And this leads to two other main issues. But first one is the fact that time isn't spent equally. So this idea of time well spent, time fluctuates. It's not a constant. It's not just those 60 minutes like we like to measure it. And time is highly dependent on how energized you are. So 60 minutes when you've had a great night's sleep, you've just gone for a run, you're feeling full of energy, those minutes will be a lot more better spent, or at least with higher quality, and maybe you get into flow. Versus 60 minutes, if you haven't slept all night, you're super tired, and it's, winter and it's cold and gray outside and you're totally uninspired. So that's the other issue here, is we're thinking time needs to be well spent, but 60 minutes, 1 hour here and another hour there are totally different. So then how do you measure it? And that then can take you down the rabbit hole of being totally obsessed with measuring your energy levels and adapting your tasks based on your energy, which I've also done, doing your most important tasks first thing in the morning and then carving out your afternoons to do these types of activities and then planning your evenings so that you do. And then all of this leads to the third and the greatest issue here around toxic productivity, which is this obsession to spend time well and overthink how you're spending each block and minute of the day, leads you to spend that time not as well because you're not as present. The obsession over doing takes away from the being. Now hear me out on this. So if you only focus on your output, on what you're doing, on the production that you're bringing, you're disconnecting from being fully present with yourself, being aware, being in tune with your emotions. It's almost as if you shift too much to robot mode. This task, then this one, then this one, this one. I've done this. I've done Pomodoro and time blocking and then scheduled a mini break in it. I still even use some of the tools, but I've learned through time and trial and error and experimenting that what matters the most in life is the quality of our presence and awareness. How present you are with the people in your life. How present you are with your own emotions. How present and aligned you are with the actions you're taking. How present you are in your business when you think strategically. The quality of your life is a direct reflection with your level of consciousness, which comes from your degree of presence and awareness. Let me repeat that. So the quality of your life, how fulfilled you feel, how happy you feel in your daily life, is a direct reflection with your level of consciousness, which really is how present, how aware you are in each and every moment. Therefore, in this desperate need to be highly productive, to optimize our life, to optimize every single minute, we focus so much on the activities, on the doings, on the outputs, on the results we need, on the outcomes, on the goals, on the processes, on the systems, that it takes away from that presence, which is also your connection to yourself, your connection to nature, your connection to your purpose, your connection to people in your life. And guess what? The less connected you are, the less happy you are. So if we look at this correctly, we started off by being obsessed about productivity, thinking if I spend each minute of the day or each hour of the day in a really productive way, I'll be happy. And what it actually does is it makes us less connected with ourselves, with other people, nature. And by being less connected, we become unhappy. And this is where the rat race begins, and this is where the down spiral, a rabbit falling down the rabbit hole in Alice in Wonderland. I like to think of it this way. This is when you fall down, 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 because then you think, I'm not doing it right. I just need more productivity tools. Maybe this next book, maybe this next tool, maybe this next podcast, maybe this next coaching program will be the solution. Maybe this next kit, tool, idea, concept will help me to finally be effective, productive, fulfilled. It doesn't really work. These tools can help you. I've used a lot of them. I've spoken about them on the channel. Of course, it helps you to single task and do your most important work first thing in the morning. Of course, it helps to schedule breaks according to your ultradian rhythm. Yes, it can be very useful to time block. And yes, it's good to work in sprints and maybe use Pomodoro. But these are just tools you use in the same way that you use a calendar to schedule meetings. They're not the solution to fulfilled life. They're not the solution to actually doing your very best work, because your very best work comes when you're fully connected, comes from being into flow. And for that, we need to let go a bit of control. And toxic productivity, this obsession around productivity, is very control driven. I know it, I lived it, I know exactly what it feels like. If I cram in all of this in 4 hours, I feel good about myself. I'm making progress on my results. I will, finish the day and know that I've accomplished dum. I know what it feels like, that dopamine hit that comes from this idea of being highly productive. But if instead we shift to still having maybe some goals or outcomes we're focusing on, but we focus instead fully on being present, on being in tune with your body, on noticing if your emotions shift while you're working, on increasing your level of presence, then several things happen. You get into flow, deliver your best work, but also you feel happier and fulfilled because you're no longer dependent on the outcome in order to feel happy. Because when you're just in the productive mode, when you're just in the doing mode, when you're just in the sort of that yang obsession of getting things done, it's so obsessed on the results that you stop listening to your body. You don't listen if you're tired or you need a break. You force through, you push through, you think you need to grind in order to get the results. And this, if you repeat it constantly, leads to burnout, leads to stress, leads to overwhelm. And it's not the solution. This will never make you feel very happy. And I'm not suggesting that we don't work. I'm not suggesting that the solution of presence and awareness is to meditate the entire day. Starting with meditation is fantastic. But unless you want to be a monk in a temple, which is great, but otherwise you might not want to meditate the entire day. But the question here is, can you show up and do your work and do the doing and do all the actions, not from a place of force, not from a place of productivity obsession, not from a place of fitting everything into time blocks all the time, but from a place of presence, from a place of alignment, from a place of calmness. If you're able to show up with calm, with presence, with alignment, with listening to yourself, then you not only become more productive and more in flow, you feel happier, you feel lighter, you feel more fulfilled. I know because I've done both. I've done the force and the grind and the productivity obsession and the I just must get all of these tasks done by 12 or by 4 p.m. or by 8 p.m. and just one after the next and sort of pushing through like a robot. I've also done, I'm feeling calm. I trust the process. Put on some classical music. I write the blog article. Feels calm. It feels easy. It feels relaxed. And it's a totally different energy. If you think of me recording this episode, how would it sound if I was forcing myself to do this? If it came from a place of grind and hustle, I have to do it now. I need to record X amount of episodes by this time. I was really forcing it. You know, I don't use a script. I use some key points that I memorized beforehand. How on earth would I show up and speak for half an hour with no script and a few core ideas if I was just forcing? After a while, I'd dry up. I would lose ideas, inspiration, creativity. It would all go out of the window. I'd probably feel stuck after about 5 minutes. Now instead, I focus on coming from a place of calm, presence, calming down my nervous system, feeling grounded, and then just listening to what comes through and allowing it to come through. And this is exactly how we can shift from toxic productivity, where there's an obsession on the doing, to doing complemented and with a main part of being. If we're able to shift from the what to the how. What is where all your focus is on the output, the outcome, the things that you're doing. How is how present are you? How calm are you? How in tune are you with yourself? And if you make that your core priority, I guarantee, tell me in the comments if you're watching this on YouTube or also on different podcasts or even on LinkedIn, just tell me if I'm wrong, that if you shift all of your focus on the how, on how present and calm you are, tell me that you don't actually become more productive, that you're not more fulfilled, that you don't make decisions more clearly. It's impossible that that wouldn't be the case, right? Because if you're coming from a place of calm and presence and joy and you're relaxed and your nervous system isn't like freaking out, of course you make better decisions. Of course you feel happier. Of course your work is more productive because you're more in flow and you think more clearly. Everything comes more naturally. But yet, because of this toxic productivity and because we haven't learned the presence part, the being part, and when we're a high achiever, and I know what I'm talking about, all my clients are high achievers, and I've struggled with, being a high achiever and the arrival fallacy and being goal focused and having my results, dependent on how I feel about myself. So if I have good results, I feel great about myself. If I have bad results, I don't feel good about myself. All this high achiever stuff puts you into that grind, toxic productivity mindset. And unless you balance it out with presence, some meditation, some time in nature, some space where you don't have noise around you all the time and constant stimulation, if you don't balance it out, it leads to overwork, burnout, high stress, misalignment, feeling lost and stuck and confused, low performance. Because that's also the thing, right? You focus like this all the time, and after a while, you lose touch with why you're doing what you're doing. You stop enjoying your work, and your performance just plummets. And again, I'm speaking from both my own experience and also people I've coached. So I've seen this. I've lived it myself in my own body, in my own life. I've lived what it's like to lead a toxic productivity way of living and way of working. And I've also lived and seen it in my clients and people I've spoken to and people I've interviewed on the podcast, what it's like when you allow yourself to show up in your work every single day, or at least 5 days a week, right? From a place of calm and presence. So in order to retrain this, so you're thinking, okay, what do we take from the toxic productivity that we have learned that's useful, and how do we learn to integrate more of this being? What you can take from the toxic productivity is whatever tools you feel generally serve you. Like, it is useful to start your day with your most important task. It's absolutely fundamental to single task. It's great to use time blocking sometimes. You might want a bit of flexibility around it so it's not too rigid all the time, but it's a pretty useful concept. And it's great to schedule some breaks. And I use my calendar for most things. And then there's a bunch of different tools out there that can support you and can help you. Great. Now, how do we integrate more of the being part? For this, we need to create space. And that's typically what we don't do when we're in the toxic productivity mode, right? So you see how this repeats itself. If you're in the toxic productivity mode, you want to use every single minute well, and therefore you end up not dedicating minutes to space, being alone, meditation, because it doesn't fit and it doesn't seem worthwhile. So apply your toxic productivity mindset to being. This means carving out time for meditation, maybe in the morning, for a lunch walk, maybe an evening walk where you reflect on the day, and for moments where you just sit in silence, reflect, tune in with yourself. By allowing this space, several things will happen. First of all, this calms down your nervous system, which helps you to be more balanced and to make better decisions. And it just supports your overall, your mental health, your physical health, just having a more balanced nervous system. And then on top of that, the being becomes stronger. So the part of you that's in tune with yourself, that's present, that's aware of your surroundings, this becomes stronger. And as this is stronger, during your work, you'll catch yourself. When you want to multitask, when you want to impulsively answer an email, when you're feeling angry, when you're hesitating between multiple decisions, in all these different moments, you will be able to show up calmer, more grounded, especially if you're a leader or CEO of a company and you're leading big teams, then you'll notice a difference in the way you lead the company when you have more being, more presence, more awareness, more calmness within, because this will reflect in the way you lead. People resonate better if you show up with a strong sort of inner presence, inner calmness, and you're able to lead the team effectively, have challenging conversations, show the next steps and directions from this place of calmness. It's so important when you're a leader because people look at leaders as role models. And that's often the case, often the CEOs are some of the most stressed people because they have high pressure and high responsibilities. But then that also means that the entire teams feel stress underneath. And a tiny bit of stress here and there is great. It does help you perform, absolutely. Chronic stress doesn't. Chronic stress totally deteriorates performance. We want punctual stress. So if you have a last minute sprint or a 1 week, challenging deadline, okay, you can have a bit of a boost of, adrenaline and cortisol going through a bit of a rush and then calm again. They can't be on sprint all the time. Business is a marathon, so we want to be having a cadence that's a lot more fulfilling and a lot more sustainable is the word I was looking for, a lot more sustainable. And this helps you to have better performance, but also for everyone to feel better within the company. So occasional spikes of stress, not continuous stress. Okay, so by carving out time, the space to focus on the being, this impacts your leadership. If you're leading as a company, it impacts your life. It impacts the performance that you have. And then you can add some of the productivity tools that you need. But you're no longer measuring time based on outputs. It's more general flow. How do you feel during the day? How calm were you? How in tune were you with yourself? And you might still want to measure, of course, some outcomes, some outputs, some goals, of course, here and there, but not as obsessively and controlling as in that toxic productivity mode. Another thing that often happens with the toxic productivity way of thinking and acting is that when things get out of your control, have you experienced that? Where suddenly you're not able to, for whatever reason, do those tasks. Maybe you decided you do these really important things and you suddenly fall sick with the flu, or someone you're relying on who needed to support you for the next activities is unavailable, or something gets postponed, or there's a problem with your transport, or whatever it is, things happen. Now, if you're in that over toxic productivity mode, you freak out, right? Who's ever had a crisis where it's like, I needed to do this by Friday evening and now I can't because of, this person or this change, or it's something in your personal life, and then you just feel like everything is falling apart and it's the end of the world. It's not, right? But it gets so out of control because we're so in this mode and mindset and controlling everything, and everything fits in perfectly. And if one brick falls, then the whole thing falls apart, and then huge stress. And is that productive? Does that actually support you to find an alternative solution, to think creatively, to make up for it? No, because you're stressed. When you're super stressed, loads of cortisol pumping through, you can't think clearly, make maybe wrong decisions. Sometimes you make it worse in those moments. Maybe you fire someone out of anger because of it, and actually you really needed that person. It's a random example, but you see what I'm saying? We do random things when we're in that state. Now, if in contrast, you go from this toxic productivity to, we could call it conscious productivity. Go from toxic productivity to conscious productivity, where it's really all about the level of consciousness and how present you are in your activities. Then if that's your main focus and that's your main priority, then when something you had planned or a certain outcome or something that needed to happen at a given moment doesn't happen, you're okay. Because you remember that the core thing is to stay calm and to stay grounded at all times. And that's your core priority. And from that place, you find a solution, you do it differently. Sure, there can still be a bit of a spike of cortisol. We're not all monks. We're not just, Zen Buddhist monks feeling calm about everything. Of course, there might be a bit of frustration or a bit of impatience, but it's not half as bad as when we're in that obsession mode of spending each and every second well. So this is the leap that I'm inviting you to take, to go from this toxic productivity way of being and acting towards a more conscious productivity way of being primarily and then doing. I'd love to hear how this impacts you and your life and your work. Please share in the comments. I read every single comment myself and answer them myself. If you're new to the show, my name is Katie Stoddard. I work as a conscious leadership, high performance coach, speaker, and podcaster. Thank you so much for tuning in today. I hope you enjoyed the episode, and see you in the next one.